Hi friends. Okay, well, this is not the video I had planned for this week. I actually had a pretty big project planned, but I had multiple evenings this week where I had work events and Penny got sick on top of that. I mean, she's okay now. She just apparently really enjoys eating things that are not food. So, with all of that, I didn't have time to get a project done for this week. But I still wanted to put something out for you guys. So, instead, we're going to take a look back at my top 10 favorite projects so far. What is this big block of wood? It's actually a tissue box cover. You slide the bottom out and put your Kleenex box in. This one has a few rough spots and some kind of sharp corners, so I'm going to sand it first. The idea of a cover for your tissue box is kind of funny to me. It's not like tissue boxes are so disgusting or unsightly that you need to hide them. They're usually in pretty patterns and designs. Maybe it's meant to help match your decor. But when I was young, I used to see these obviously handmade ones in houses that were either like a creepy crocheted doll or sewn together with that cross-stitch plastic that everyone uses for crafts at summer camp. How is that an improvement? This one probably won't be what anyone would call an improvement either, because it's about to get real colorful and obnoxious. After sanding and a coat of gesso, I'm going in with the background colors first. I wanted this to be really bright and colorful to match the kind of goofy idea that I had. So I'm starting with yellow at the top. Then I'm going to tape it up because I want just a yellow stripe. For the majority of the box, I want this pastel-y green. Then I'm going to do it all again because I want another stripe on the bottom. When I peeled the tape off of the yellow stripe, there was a little bit of bleeding. So on the bottom, I'm using this trick that I've seen in those art hack videos. After I put the tape on, I'm painting over it with the color that's underneath the tape. Green in this case. That sort of seals the tape down, and then I can go over with the color that I actually want, which is blue. When I peeled the tape off, the line was perfect. I also painted the little escape hatch thing, except that I'm stupid and painted it upside down. So let me just fix that. Okay, now on to the characters. I had this admittedly kind of dumb idea to make all of the characters on the tissue box using tissues. So first we have Olive. Olive is a baby cow, and Olive is a little dramatic. She cries over everything, and I mean everything. She stubbed her toe. Someone bumped into her. She doesn't like what's on TV. She has horns and doesn't want them. Okay, I'll fix it. Olive may be a little dramatic, but like I said, she's just a baby, so we can cut her a little slack. Even if you need earplugs to hang out with her, she's still really cute. On the next side, we have Milo. Milo is also a baby, and like all babies, his nose is always running. Is it a cold, or is his brain leaking out of his nose? We'll never know, but at least he's willing to use a tissue. In case it's not clear, because honestly I drew it and I'm still confused, Milo is a cat, not a tiger. And he has a little green ball of yarn with him. Was it originally green, or did it become green after spending a little time around Milo? His boogers. Get it? Next, we have Kiki. Kiki is sneezing because she's allergic to everything. She's allergic to the grass, to the flowers, even her own furry little tail. That carrot that's laying on the ground unmunched, guess what? She's allergic to it. But she has a pretty good attitude about it and just keeps hopping along. Last, we have Gary. What can I say about Gary? He's really happy-go-lucky, but that might be because there's not a lot going on between his horns. Gary forgets where he's going when he's halfway there. You ask him how he's doing, and he answers with yes. Gary's not even 100% sure of his own name. He'll answer to Larry, Barry, or Mary. But you know what Gary, Larry, Barry, Mary always says? Ignorance is bliss. After all my friends were looking good, I sealed them in with a very careful coat of varnish. And I absolutely love this box. Just can't decide who's my favorite. Olive and Kiki are so cute, but Gary is so adorably brain dead. Sorry, Milo. Dun da da da! Isn't it awesome? My friend actually found this one for me, and it's so amazingly tragic that I can't wait to work on it. It looks like some kind of puzzle, but it's like varnished together with a really thick varnish. Like there's globs of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is sand this puppy down. Well, this pony down. And I'm going to put another piece of paper under it because this is going to get messy. As I'm starting to sand, I see these areas where the varnish looks lighter and cloudier than other spots. And at first I wasn't sure what these were. However, after some careful scientific investigation, I figured out that this was basically like loose areas of the varnish. I could probably paint over these and it would be fine. But since I can't leave well enough alone, I spent a couple of hours scraping and sanding and scraping and sanding. Was it entirely necessary? Absolutely not. But it was extremely satisfying. When it was all done, I cleaned up the mess and wiped the whole thing down. You know what time it is next. Gesso! And I got this new big daddy jug of gesso that I can dip right in. No more having to poop it out of this little bottle into a container. Now, what am I going to turn this into? The amount of ideas that I went through for this guy. So obviously this is a unicorn. So I started with ideas for unicorns. But he has a beard. So this is a boy unicorn. Then I saw this picture and had the best idea. I am super excited for her and obsessed with the Barbie movie that's coming out. As everyone should be. And this jean jacket reminded me of Ken. So this is a Ken unicorn. A unicorn. A Kenicorn. We'll get back to this guy in a second, but first I want to paint the back. I'm not going to do two different sides like I did with my last ugly thrift flip. So I'm just going to go with plain amazing Barbie pink for the back and sides and all the tiny little crevices and edges. One trick that I've discovered to get more coverage and less layers is to paint each layer in a different direction. Now that that's done, let's get back to the front. I'm going to use paint markers for this so that I can have more control over the smaller areas and around the edges. I took a lot of inspiration from promo photos and trailers for the new movie. Like here, we have a cutoff jean jacket from this look. And here are the trunks that Ken wears to the beach. For the mane and tail, obviously Ken doesn't have beautiful flowing locks, so I tried to make them look like old Barbie coloring books. I used to love coloring Barbie's hair in when I was little. Something about all of the different strands that they would outline and coloring it all in different shades of yellow made 5-year-old me feel like I was a world-class artist. Obviously, Ken doesn't have a goatee, but I really didn't feel like performing major surgery on him after the extreme exfoliation, so the goatee stays. While I thought it would be really funny to give Kenicorn a six-pack and pecs like Ken in the movie, I wanted it to be super clear what the theme is. So he's going to get a shirt with his initial on the front. Now to tidy everything up with a second coat. Then I'm going to go back in and add some details. Some shadows and outlines. Filling in his initial. And outlining this horseshoe necklace
which Ken actually does wear in the movie, and that just turned out to be a super lucky coincidence. Then, just to really beat you over the head with this theme, I'm gonna add his name to his underwear. And now he's done. I am so in love with him. Like, I originally went with the idea because I just thought it was really funny, but he legitimately came out so cute. And I love that he looks so bright and cartoony, like he really belongs in Barbie Land. In all honesty, I knew I was going to do this backpack the second I put it in my cart at the store. It's just a simple little backpack with one big pocket and one small front pocket. The material is definitely not great. It's thin and wrinkly and really shiny. But the color of this backpack is so pretty, so I knew I had to do this. The first thing I'm going to do is cut this tag off. And then to make it easier to sketch on, I'm going to put a Taylor Swift coloring book inside. For my sketch, I'm going to use a white chalk pastel pencil. I wanted something that would be really easy to erase or paint over. And I can see what I'm doing, but you can't see a thing. The glare off the fabric makes it look like there's nothing there, but I swear there is. I used some binder clips to clamp the backpack to the book inside and keep the fabric kind of taut so that it's not wrinkling and running away from me. For a white base coat, I'm going to use some matte fabric paint. For most of this project, I'm going to use a mix of matte and puffy fabric paint. I have brush-on fabric paint and leather paint, but those sort of sink into the fabric. And I'm hoping that the mix I'm going to use will create more of a rubbery, plasticky layer on top. The puffy paint will make it a little thicker and have a tiny bit of shine, and the matte paint will make it easier to paint on. I really don't know that that's what it's going to do, but I sound like I know what I'm talking about. Like I said, for the base coat, I'm just using matte fabric paint because I don't really care as much about what it looks like. I just want it covered. The first coat was just a little bit too splotchy, and I'd rather do more white coats and less color coats, so a second coat it is. For the actual paint job itself, I'm going to use a mix of puffy and matte paint. And I'm going to use up some old paint that I already have by mixing it into new colors. I couldn't begin to tell you what ratio of each I use. I just sort of throw some puffy and some matte into each mix, depending on what colors I have. Maybe someday I'll figure out what I'm doing and can be more specific. I did add some guidelines back in for myself with another chalk pastel. Before this backpack, I knew exactly what I wanted to paint as soon as I got it. And that almost never happens. Now this is obviously a monster, but my inspiration was this guy. So, in my town, there's this little spooky boutique where it's like Halloween all year. They sell a bunch of ghosts and monsters and horror movie stuff. And they have events where they give talks about spooky stuff. So recently, my friend and I went to a talk about Bigfoot. Yes, I'm a Bigfoot truther. But the point of that story is that I really wanted to make something with a cute, cartoony Bigfoot. And I still will. But with the purple of this bag, I really wanted to do a turquoisey monster. And Bigfoot is not turquoise. He also doesn't have horns or giant ears, as far as we know. So this isn't actually a Bigfoot. It's just a cute friend of Bigfoot. And according to my niece, this is Bebop. Proper cryptid identification is very important. I did have a very specific minty turquoise that I wanted, and I mixed it a little bit lighter with the thought that the paint would dry darker, but then it didn't. And you can barely see the color on camera, so I ended up making it a little darker. This is probably why I'm such a slow crafter. It takes me a few tries to get things right. I did finally get the right color, but I still wanted him more fuzzy looking, so I went around and added tufts of fur sticking up everywhere. The front pocket is where his mouth is, because I am 4, and I will pretend I'm feeding him when I put stuff in there. I made sure to get his teeth really white and sparkly because dental hygiene is pretty important when you only have 4 teeth to begin with. He can't afford to lose any of them. I filled in his horns and then added some details to his ears, gave him a pig-like nose, and some brow furrows that kind of look like tiny eyes. He's looking very Peppa Pig right now, but he will get better. To make him look extra furry, I added outlines and tons of fur tuft lines all over him. This part took forever, but it was so worth it because he looks so soft and cuddly. I'm not sure about this outline on the teeth, but it looked a little too blobby before, so I guess that this is better. And I really wanted to give him one small eye and one big eye, kind of like that zombie pumpkin I did at Halloween. But once I did, I thought it looked sort of strange, and not in a cute way, so I just went back to evenly sized eyes. And I gave him some sparkle because he deserves it. I didn't want to leave the rest of the backpack completely plain, but I didn't want to take away from Bebop. And I didn't have a ton of time left, so I added multicolored stars all over the front and sides. Should have gone a little more pastel with the star colors since they don't really match the pastel-y colors on Bebop, but I also struggle with mixing and my paint containers were already full. But after all of that, this backpack is done. And regardless of the things I might have done differently, I genuinely love this backpack so much. Bebop is so cute. I haven't loved a creature this much since Kenicorn was born. My next 5 videos will just be me painting Bebop on everything. I'm legitimately struggling to decide whether I should actually use this backpack and show it off, or display it safely in my craft room where it can never get messed up. This is actually my sketchbook that I've been using, and the cover is like a nice, thick, white, hard cardboard, so I'm gonna paint on it. First, I just need to pick a picture. That's really cute. And it's perfect to go on a sketchbook since he's painting. Sort of. We're gonna go with that guy. Now, rather than redraw this, I'm just gonna use some tracing paper to transfer this onto the cover. And I should tear this out, but I don't wanna. So I'll just fold the book back and awkwardly hold it in the air while I trace. Now to paint this, I'm gonna use paint markers. For this one, I could not find this exact picture, but I did find some references for the panda himself. So this will be the most original art yet. As original as coloring in someone else's drawing can be. Anyway, I'm starting by just blocking in all of the colors. I'm not really worried about opacity or shading yet. I'm just planning out what color each section will be. Obviously, starting with all of the paint splatters. Then moving on to the panda himself. And I was able to find some information on Panda Painter. Yes, that's his name. And according to lisafrank.com, it's not the talent he posses to paint so well, but the special paint that he uses. Because he uses paint that he gets from the rainbow that makes his creations come to life. So there you go. I'm just chugging along and I'm trying not to get too excited since this is just the first step, but these colors look great. They aren't even neon. They're just the brightest marker in each color, but they're looking so good. This is what I wanted. I did the white paint off camera since coloring white over slightly off white is so enthralling. I didn't want anyone to have a heart attack from excitement. Now, at the bottom of the page, there are these weird circles that I didn't really know what they were, but in a few pictures I found online, it looks like they're paint puddles. Which, duh, that makes total sense. So let me go back in and add them. The next problem, though, is what do I do for the background? The background could make or break this picture, obviously. Maybe a black background? That'll make all of the colors pop. I mean, maybe that's not what a Lisa Frank artist would do, but it's what I'm gonna do. I'm also realizing that I probably should have drawn more paint splatters and extended the picture a bit because it's looking a little rectangular still, but I'm too happy with this picture so far to actually care. For the ground, I just went with a nice tan wood-colored floor. And now that everything is blocked in, I can go over it with a second coat to really bump up the opacity. Then it's time for the fun part, the details. Starting with the floor, I'm going to add some wooden plank lines. And first, I used a ruler and did them all precise, and then realized you can't see them at all. So I picked a darker color to go over them, but I did not use a ruler this time, and they look a little bit like a DIY floor reno. Whatever. I added some details to the easel so it's less blocky looking, and then I moved on to the panda. And these are my favorite part of the whole picture, because it's so different from how I would normally do it. No black outlines anywhere, just using a darker and lighter color here and there to add some shadows and details. Then my most favorite of favorite details, the highlights and the shadows. The reference had these different color highlights and shadows, and ooh, I love it so much. Pink highlights and purple and blue shadows, it looks so good. For the paint splatters, I was a bit nervous because I didn't have darker versions of each color, so instead I went in with a lighter version as a sort of pre-highlight, if that makes sense. Because you know I am going to add juicy white highlights later. And with the magic of editing, later is right now. Ooh, I love this picture so much. The colors are perfect. Not a single neon, but they're so bright and they pop so well. There isn't a single thing that I would change, except maybe adding more paint splatters. So fine, one single thing. But still, I am obsessed with this. I am going to add a matte varnish over this to protect it forever and ever. And now I'm going to be so excited to use this sketchbook. Okay, I have a plan. First, I'm going to start with a canvas. This way. And I'm going to start with an underpainting with some pink paint that I already have. Alright, now that that's done, I'm just going to sketch out my idea really quick. Which I did off camera because it was a whole ordeal. I'm going to start with the objects furthest in the background and work towards the foreground. I'm trying to be nice and loose and not worry about making it opaque. I really want to let that underpainting do its work. I added a little bit of darker and lighter blues in for variation and just sort of blended it a bit as I went. Then, while that's going to dry, I'll move on down here to the grass, because this is going to be a big old field of flowers. I do have my printed out sketch next to me that I keep referring to, because even though I drew this, I'm still getting confused what is what. I still painted this flower petal in green, so that's going to look weird for a while. Anyway, this field is looking a little, well, not wonderful, but it's going to get covered with flowers, so I'm not even worried about it. Like, see this weird spot right here that's lighter than everything else? I'm not even stressing about that. That will work itself out later. Actually, no, I can't help it. Sorry, not sorry. Alright, one more slightly darker green at the top that doesn't really match the other greens, but that's what the pink layer is for, right? Okay, now I'm going to try something that I saw online that hopefully won't mess this up. I'm going to take the only fan brush that I own and have never had a use for before, put barely any paint on it, and then make these little grass strokes. Also, I think I dripped water on the painting right here, but if not, the skull is becoming possessed. The top of the field looked a little choppy, so I used a super fluffy brush to sort of blur it out. For the last part of the background, I need to add some clouds up here now that the sky is dry. Clouds are really always the riskiest thing to add to my landscapes. They can come out really good, or they can come out really butt. So I'm using a small fluffy brush, trying to start with way less paint than I think I'll need, and build up as I go. And for some reason, every time I paint clouds, my brain forgets ever having seen a cloud before. And I cannot for the life of me remember what shape a cloud is in, but I don't think it's that. I was able to blend the edges out to make it nice and wispy, and then I added a little more blue back in to make it look more instead of like. Alright, let's finally start working on the focal points of this painting. First, we have this skeleton. David has this painting called Equanimity, which is obviously a skull surrounded by flowers, and these cute little skull butterflies. I really love this painting, like the colors and the pretty but creepy vibe, so I knew that I definitely wanted to use that. I started off with an off-white base coat to fill in each little bone. And even though I used a reference, I am sure this is not anatomically correct. I went back in over each and every bone to add some shading and highlights and blend it while it was still wet. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, but I'm just doing it until I like the look of it and then I move on. I felt like he needed a slightly darker shadow, so I went in with a diluted sort of black, but then I felt like the skeleton needed to stand out a bit more from the background, so I added a super thin, teeny tiny outline. I just can't seem to help myself when it comes to outlines. Everything needs an outline. Alright, so let's start over here with these flowers. So David paints a lot of bugs and bug-like creatures, and when I was looking through his paintings and reading the descriptions behind them, I saw this one called Wonder. We'll come back to that specific one later, but it's an orchid mantis, which is a mantis that disguises itself as a flower. So I thought, what if the entire flower field is filled with bugs hidden as flowers? And David also has this painting called Jaded, which has a few different animal inspirations, but one of them is a butterfly. So these flowers are going to have a butterfly hidden in them. I based the shapes off of lilies since I think they have a very butterfly-y shape, but I also wanted to pull in the colors from the Jaded painting, the blues and yellows, and I've never seen a lily in these colors, but what the heck, we'll just call these lilies anyway. Since I obviously couldn't find a reference of a lily in these colors, I am making it up quite a bit. And I really struggled with that yellow not being yellow enough, but after I added some white to make it a bit less transparent, it was flowing much better. I added some really dark veins down the center and then immediately told them to be a little quieter, and then I added those freckle things that lilies have. I added a little bit of shadow where the petals and butterfly overlap. And then those little pollen stems. And then I moved on to the butterfly. I wanted to match the colors of the flowers and sort of blend in with its pattern, but I still don't want it to look exactly like the flower petals. It's still a butterfly, so I gave him those sort of splotchy butterfly spots. He's probably going to stand out either way with this thick, buggy body. While my palette was still wet, I added some flowers into the rest of the field using the colors of the lilies. They're not really defined, just kind of blobs that get larger and slightly more flower-shaped as they get closer to the front. Alright, moving over to this right side, these are, I think I used magnolias as the reference because this is the orchid mantis reference that I used, and the shape of magnolias looked the most like it. It would make sense that an orchid would look like an orchid mantis, but I'm just not seeing it. Plus, I can't imagine orchids grow in fields. Anyway, the orchid mantis that David painted is purple, but these are going to be pink, because the reference that I had was pink, and I have a plan for some purple later. Now, rather than torture myself with blending some very different colors together, again, I'm just going to go in with a few different shades of pink, getting darker towards the base. Let's move up to the mantis herself. She's pretty much the same colors as the flowers themselves, just with a little green added in for the legs and on her head. She's so cute! I painted in the branches, and I just love painting branches. It's a really weird thing to say, And I don't know why, because they seem like they'd be really boring, but I just always really like painting them. All right, this last section down here in the center is some tulips with a hidden spider. Okay, listen. I don't actually think there are spiders that hide themselves as tulips, so don't panic anytime you see a tulip. When I was trying to find more bugs that disguise themselves as flowers, I found this video. I can't really find any information on it, but I'm 100% sure it's not real. But it is still cool looking, and it fit the theme, so here we are. I'm using purple for these with a sort of lighter edge because I've seen tulips that have that like scalloped edge thing, and I thought that looked really cool. Plus, purple will fit. I basically painted these the same way that I did the magnolias, where I get darker towards the base, because I only really know how to paint flowers in a gradient. But I like it, so I don't really care. Like, look at them, they're so pretty. I think I'm just gonna paint flowers for the rest of my life. Now, I'm not sure that you can tell this is a spider, so I added some giant eyes and the tiniest little spider paws. Because if you looked at a zoomed in picture of a spider, they have paws. I still don't like them, but I feel just the tiniest bit bad about not liking them because they have baby paws. Then I of course added little purple flowers everywhere. And then I went back in with all of the other colors and added a ton more flowers in. Can you tell a difference? Here is the final painting. The original plan was to take a painting of each other's and do it in our style. And this is definitely how my heart and brain see David. And it must be my style because I drew it and painted it, but it's not really based off one piece or character. But I actually really love it. The artist that I drew is Loz Antonino Creations. So first, I need to decide what I'm going to create. Loz is definitely a cat person. That much I know. So we're going to start with a cat. Don't judge my sketch. It's the very beginning here. Okay, her favorite colors are pink, purple, and teal. She loves the beach. Ooh, she says in the questionnaire that her ideal animal would be a baby tiger. So maybe this cat is actually a baby tiger. And this is his nursery, and he's got toys all around him. Okay, I think I've got a vague plan of an idea. Wait. I think I've got a vague idea of a plan. Really quickly, and mostly off camera, I found a million references, sketched out my idea, and transferred it onto a canvas. Okay, finally, it's time to paint. Since Loz said her favorite colors are pink, purple, and teal, I'm going to paint the nursery in those colors. I'm going to start with the background and sort of work my way forward. I want the background to be really light and blurry because I want the focus to be on the cute little tiger. After one coat though, these were not backgroundy enough. You know what I mean. So I lightened the color. Then, after that was fixed, I needed to add something more. So I spent a lot of brain time trying to decide what even to make for Loz. I settled on a painting as opposed to a craft because even though she does do some cute cartoony things from time to time, she has a more artsy-fartsy style than I do. Like, her style is more the kind that you would actually see in a gallery. So I really went back and forth about whether I should do something in my sort of cutesy style, but I ultimately decided to go more painterly. So, long story long, I decided to add a little texture to the walls and the carpet. You know how walls aren't just like one flat color and carpet is sort of fuzzy?
Let's get a move on, Rose.
Anyway, I'm not even sure if you can see it, but it's important to me that you know it's there. Next, I'm going to work on this wall. And here we have a window out to the beach. Yes, this baby tiger lives on the beach. Because Loz said that she loves the beach. I mean, I also love the beach. Does anyone hate the beach? Besides Anakin Skywalker? This was by far the easiest part of the whole painting. Like, I think this beach just wanted to paint itself. Look at those clouds. They're so wispy and cloudy and not at all weird and patchy. Ooh, and the beach grass. Fab. I am so proud. After the beach was done, I did spend a good hunk of time obsessing over getting the window frame looking nice and woody. For this other wall, I decided to add a couple of little paintings. But, and this is the idea that I was most excited to add, these are going to be tiny versions of paintings that Loz has done. The first one is this skeleton Snow White that she just did recently. Well, it's a blurry and slightly deranged looking version of the painting that she did. But I'm actually not worried about it because these aren't the focal point of the painting. They're just a fun little Easter egg for Loz. For the second painting, I had to go back a year to this video where she painted the Little Mermaid. This one is a little bit busier, but I just took it shape by shape, and luckily Ariel is pretty recognizable in her own right. Ooh, you can really see the texture of the wall in this close-up shot. Good, it wasn't all for nothing. Okay, last, let me just put little frames around these. Next, for these 3 random items on the floor, I'm really not sure that they fit with the rest of the painting, but since this is a nursery, the baby that lives there definitely needs some toys. I'm not sure if you've hung out with a baby before, but they are not entertained for very long with windows and paintings. Unless you have a really intellectual baby. So anyway, these are toys. The first toy is Legos. And I chose this because one of the questions on the questionnaire asked about your favorite childhood memory. And Loz's was about a day trip that she took with a teacher and her best friend, and part of that trip was a Lego exhibition. Obviously, Loz told the story much more beautifully, but I'm not sure how much of the story she would want published. But I thought that it might be a nice personal touch on there. Provided that she understands the reference. She might just think I'm a weirdo. But I did paint the Legos in her favorite colors, so there's that. This item over here is a pancake squishy. In the same story about her day trip, she shared that they had pancakes. So obviously pancakes. It's a squishy because before I settled on a painting, I, for a split second, thought about painting a squishy for her. But Loz doesn't really give me squishy vibes. So this is a representation of a squishy that she won't actually know is a squishy unless I tell her. And why a tiger would have a squishy, I don't know. They would definitely destroy it. But at least it looks really good. The last toy in the room is a ball of yarn. Because a tiger is a cat, and cats like balls of yarn. It's like a law in the cat constitution. They like yarn and fish with the head still on. Alright, let's get to the main star of this show. So Loz said her ideal animal would be a baby tiger. And she has created a fair few Disney-themed pieces, so I'm going to take a gamble that she at least enjoys Disney. So this is going to be a baby Raja, Jasmine's tiger in Aladdin. I have many references that I'm flipping through so that I can get the proportions and the color patterns of Raja just right. And my plan is to work in sections as I go, focusing on blending and shading and getting it just right before I move on. Loz is so artistically talented that I was really worried about making this good enough for her. I spent so long on this, making it just right, that I even figured out how to shade on the white. I did not mean to rhyme. For you paint nerds out there, I used Payne's Gray. I don't know how it's different from other grays, but all the fancy artists in the art chat that I'm in rave about Payne's Gray. I don't know why they love it so much, but I used it because of them, and I think it looks pretty good. I also worked really hard to make this guy uber fuzzy, because fuzzy equals cute. Finally, moving on to his eyes, and I'm hoping that they'll look less lasery and creepy once I paint them in. I'm really struggling with his eyeliner here, so I had to get really close. Look at that. That is my ear. Disgusting. Okay, Here's a random question for more experienced painters. When you're working off of a palette and you're like mixing your paint on the palette and then painting with it right then, what if you need to touch it up later? Like, I will inevitably mess up something in a section that I consider done and have moved on from, and now I need to touch it up. But by then, the paint is dried on the palette. Are you just remixing colors constantly? And how do you get it to match? As I'm nearing the end and finally getting to his face, I'm starting to get less nervous and much more excited about this painting. I'm really liking how it's turning out. This sort of really blendy and detailed type of painting is not something that I usually do, but I'm really considering doing it more. The cartoony aesthetic that I tend to go with is something that just really makes my eyes happy. But spending so much time on each little area and then actually being super proud of how it turns out, that makes my little baby artist brain really happy. The last couple of details this little guy needed were some eye shinies and some whiskers. I really, really, really hope Loz likes this. I know I've said that a lot, but it's true. Then he's ready to get shipped off to Australia. This is a set of nesting dolls. If you've never seen them before, nesting dolls are a set of like wooden pod people that fit inside of each other. You open the first one and surprise! There's another little parasite inside. Then you open that one and hello, there's another one. And so on and so on. This particular set has 5 dolls. And here I'm trying to show scale.
Real scientific.
Biggest one is this big, and the littlest one is this little. Let me just pop them all back in and give them brain damage. One thing that I noticed when playing around with these is that they are really hard to open and close. And that I'm a child. So I'm going to throw down another sheet of paper and sand the little lip thing until they fit. I also noticed this sort of chewed up area here on the middle one, so I gave that a little sandy sand too. Now before I paint, I want to protect the little lip on the bottom half. If I get paint on it, it might get too tight to fit, and I defeat all of the work I just did sanding. So I'm going to tape this area off on all 4 of the ones that open. And then I'm going to do a coat of gesso. We've all seen this before, so let's just speed right through it. With all of the pieces prepped, I'm going to start with the smallest one. When I was trying to come up with ideas for these, I went through a lot of random themes. But I'm still in a bit of a Barbie fever, so I ultimately decided to theme it after other toys I had when I was a kid. So this little one is going to be a glowworm. I know we had a glowworm floating around our playroom when I was a kid, but since it's a baby toy and I don't remember being a baby, I'm not actually sure if it was mine or my sister's. They still make glowworms now, but I like the original face. The one that looks like a geriatric turtle. So that's the one that I'm going to attempt. Although painting a face on a doll this small, that's rough. After a lot of finagling, he's looking okay-ish. So let me add a few other details. And many tiny touch-ups. And that's one done. This next one is going to be a little people. Not a little person, a little people. One of these. They for sure still make little people, but they've gotten progressively fancier. And the ones I played with when I was little look like this. I'm pretty sure they were old even when I was playing with them, based on the dates that I can find online. But they are one of the things that I remember playing with the most as a kid. I used to call it playing people, and each one of them was a very specific person. This one was always me. I'm keeping the doll a little cracked around the middle so that I don't paint it closed. This slightly darker blue at the bottom is meant to be a sort of shadow, where the bottom of the peg is smaller. This version of Little People is pretty simple, but she does have a fancy ruffle around her neck. She also gets an outline around her hair and her simple little face. And she's done. For this middle doll, I'm going to do a troll doll. Please tell me everyone knows what a troll doll is. Not these. These. I don't know if I actually played with these so much as I sort of had them and collected them. Their hair was the nastiest, scratchiest, fuzzy whatever, and it always got gross if you did anything besides display them. But they were a thing when I was a kid, and they were everywhere. Trolls were every color of the rainbow, but this one is going to have bright neon orange hair. No matter how hard I try, I cannot color correct this to show accurately. He's also going to have an orange jewel in his belly, which, if I remember my troll lore correctly, that makes him magic. Because this one is a little bigger and a little less simple of a design, the details are really important. Especially since 2/3 of the doll is flesh. So I tried really hard to get all the little wrinkles and rolls exactly where I wanted them. I had a 95% success rate. I do touch that up later, but I was eager to move on. This next one is, well, honestly, it ends up being my least favorite out of all of them. But this doll is going to be a Beanie Baby. I assume everyone knows what a Beanie Baby is. Specifically, I chose this Beanie Baby. I feel like the bears were the most recognizable of the beanies, and this one seemed like it would be the most fun to paint. The colors in this picture are kind of pukey, so I'm going to punch them up with some neon. I am trying to keep within the lines of my sketch. These are where the bear is sewn together. And you know how when fabric gets sewn together, the pattern doesn't always match up? That was my thinking behind not splotching the color over the stitch lines. Also, I wanted to keep them sort of visible for later. After 2 coats, this was looking really bright and kind of garish. Plus the blobs of color weren't looking very tie-dye at all. So to tone down the colors a little, I mixed a little bit of white paint with a lot of bit of water and painted on a sort of hazy wash over the whole thing. I'm satisfied with that. At least enough to move on to the lines. Beanie Baby bears have this very specific face with the Y-shaped stitching, so that part looks good, but the ear placement is tragic. I don't know what I was thinking with that. And I wasn't really sure what to do for his feet, because they sort of have sock-like feet, and I did this. So I guess he's kind of sitting, but also he has legs coming up from his feet. His knees bent backwards? I don't know. Let's just finish off his face before it gets weirder. Last, I added his little rainbow peace sign. Ugh, his head bothers me so much. He looks like a seal. Let's just move on. This last one is my favorite. This is going to be a popple. No one ever seems to know what a popple is, so this is a popple. They're these cute little multicolored animal things with a pouch on their back. You could turn the pouch inside out and it would wrap over their hands and feet and they'd turn into a ball. Popple was my guy. Yes, his name was Popple. I slept with Popple every night for far longer than I'm willing to admit. And I still have him, but he kind of fell victim to one of my dogs and lost his nose in the attack. So he's hidden safely away until I can figure out how to repair him. This is the specific Popple that I had. He's called Prize Popple, I guess. The sheer amount of tries that it took to mix the right shade of pink for his body is pretty embarrassing. For all of the little details on these dolls, I used the smallest paint markers that I had. For some, I was lucky enough to have the right color in a Posca marker, but for some I had to use these Thule art markers. Now the paint in these markers is great, but the tip. God, I hate these stupid plastic tips. I cannot keep the paint flowing. I had to stop every 2 millimeters or so and draw on a piece of paper to get it working again. I pushed through filming this, but I desperately wanted to just turn off the camera for this, because I knew it was going to be painful to watch.
Off camera, I did touch it up and fatten up the lines. Popple's face is actually the one that I was the most stressed about, because it's the face that I know the best. If it's off, I'm definitely going to notice. Ultimately, after a few touch-ups though, I think it came out pretty good. I outlined his ears and finished off his tail. And then it was time for his hair. Mint condition, never loved Popples have pretty fuzzy hair. But once they're cuddled and inevitably washed, their hair kind of pills a little bit. Plus, in the Popple cartoon, all of their hair is curly. This is too much Popple information. Long story short, Popple has curly hair, and that's what I'm drawing. Last, I added a cute little highlight to his eyes, and then decided to do that for a few of the other ones. So here they are all painted. I'm trying to lay them all out aesthetically. Got it. Ugh. And here they are all done.
So I'm starting with this cow. It's probably not the absolute ugliest thing I've ever seen, but it's pretty weird looking. I especially hate this different size wood slice thing that it's got going on, and this really gross looking tail. Oh, it also came with a little friend. Ugh. So let's get to work on prepping this thing. First, I'm gonna remove that price sticker. Then dispose of our arachnid friend.
Goodbye.
And get rid of this nasty tail. Maybe. It's really stuck on there. Finally. I'm sanding off that leftover glue from the tail, and then sanding the rest of the cow because the wood is a little rough, and I want a smooth base to paint on later. Here's where we're at now. So next I'm going to try to do something about this weird, uneven body. For this, I'm going to try some air dry clay. I'm not using that same kind of clay I've used in the past. That stuff didn't end well for me. This stuff is some cheap kids brand of air dry clay. I thought this might be easier because it seems softer and it also sort of sticks to itself. It kind of has the consistency of putty. I used it to fill and smooth out the transition between the layers. I wasn't confident in my clay skills enough to just cover the whole thing and mold a new body. After I got the shape how I wanted it, I dipped my finger in a little bit of water to smooth it out more. It's still not super smooth, but since cows aren't super smooth looking either, I wasn't too worried about it. I had quite a bit of clay left over, and I didn't want to waste it, so I crafted a little headpiece for my friend. Now this clay is kind of weird. Even when it's fully dry, it's still a little soft. I'm trying to show on camera that it still has a little give, but it's not really reading very well. To me, this feels sort of like foam. It's stiff, but still a little squishy. This will still work for what I need, it's just not what I was expecting. There's a few rough spots where I left fingerprints of clay, and I also want to smooth out the top of this tail. Oh yeah, I added a tail off camera. I sanded these spots down very gently to clean this up. And now that it's sanded and clean, it's time for a base coat, or 4, to cover all of this clay and leftover paint. I'm going to cook up a really light pink, because this cow is going to be a strawberry milk cow. I know, it's not the most original idea, but I don't care. I love strawberry milk, and pink is my favorite color. Plus, I didn't have any better ideas. After the first 2 coats, I wasn't really feeling this pink, so I lightened it even more. And that looks so much better. It's almost exactly the same.
Huh?
Now that that's done, I'm gonna go over a few areas where I made a mess with the white paint. I'm not trying to completely cover up this pink paint, I just want to make it easier to cover later with the light colored paint I'm gonna use. I colored the horns and the udder with paint markers. I'm a little confused why a cow has horns and an udder, but apparently that can happen. To get into these really tiny little areas, I had to get a little creative. I dabbed some paint into a little palette and used a tiny paintbrush to get into those crevices. For this weird waddle thing, I'm gonna try to make it into a bell. I don't know what it was actually supposed to be, but cows wear bells. I don't think this really worked. It doesn't look like a bell. It looks like a bad superhero symbol. Moving on to the spots. And I'm excited to do these. These are what will really make it look like a cow. I also colored the little hairs on his tail. I knew I was going to use this exact Posca for the spots, so I specifically mixed a warmer pink for the body. But when I went to color in the hooves, the fuchsia color just didn't look right. It's too blue. So once it dried, I had to go back over it with black. Next, it's time for the face. He's going to be looking up because he's still got that headpiece that I made. In order to paint this, I jabbed a little toothpick into it. And because this clay is soft, it went in really easy. After a quick base coat, I painted it a nice strawberry color, because this is obviously a strawberry. I don't think I actually tricked anybody there. Now, why does he have a strawberry headpiece? Because strawberry milk cows eat strawberries. That's how the milk gets strawberry flavored. And they need really big strawberries to feed them. And this cow got a little too enthusiastic and vines, and one fell on his head. That's the actual story. It's absolutely not the only way I could show that he was a strawberry milk cow. I don't know the proper glue to secure foamy clay strawberries to a painted wooden cow, so let's go with industrial glue. After letting it dry overnight, I decided to add a little strawberry sauce to cover up the gaps and the shiny glue. I'm going to use fabric paint, and I miraculously had some that matched the strawberry. No, really, I didn't know I had this at all. I was fully prepared to have to custom mix some. I've never used fabric paint to do this kind of thing, and it's a little harder to work with than I expected. Mostly it's just thicker and less self-smoothing, but I think I got most of the lumps out. After letting all of this dry for about 3 days, I was ready to varnish it, and I'm praying to the varnish gods that this doesn't get messed up. Success! Here it is all done. I actually really love this. He's so cute. Something about his little cross eyes staring up at that strawberry just make me so happy.
I had this blue clay left over, and it was the perfect size for a little figurine. I started with a large ball shape, nice and blobby. Then I rolled it into a sort of ovally egg shape and stamped the ends against the tabletop as I went to make it a little more marshmallowy. Kind of like a fat, round little cylinder. I pushed in a dent about 1/3 of the way down and then rolled it a little bit to give it just the slightest hint of a chin sticking out. It kind of looks like an upside-down boot. Then I used really tiny chunks of clay to make 4 more tiny marshmallow shapes. These are going to be the arms and legs. Luckily, this clay was still very sticky, so I didn't need to glue these on. Next, I took some peach clay and rolled it out pretty thin. I used my circle cutter to cut out a circle and rolled it again to make it a little thinner. This is going to be his tummy patch, so I refined the shape a bit by hand, making it thin enough to fit between his legs. I cut it off so the bottom would be even with his crotchular area, and then I stuck it on. I cut these little lines into it that you see on cartoony dragons and dinosaurs, because this is going to be a dinosaur. What are those lines supposed to be? Anyway, after he dried overnight, it's time for some spikes. I used balls of different colored clay in roughly the same size and formed them into little triangles before sticking them on. One of the things that I love about foam clay is that it's very easy to manipulate into a new shape. It's definitely the least strong-willed of the clays. Also, you might be thinking that this dinosaur is missing a tail. And you would be a silly goose, because the purple triangle is his tail. It's just stubby and short and the same size as his spikes. He's just a baby. It hasn't grown in yet. Stop bringing it up. He's sensitive about it. Last, he needs a little face. Ah, why is he so cute? He does have a few flat spots where he sat to dry, but I don't care. I love him so much.
He's like a little tiny baby. He needs a name. How about Cutie, because he's so cute? So I found this picture of this popsicle art that I really, really love. But I don't have a couple grand to spend on art. So I'm going to try to make my own. So I found this mold at Hobby Lobby. And I know this art is made out of resin, but instead I'm going to use some casting material. Resin-crete supposedly just needs water mixed in, and it sets up in 30 minutes. I used all of my mix-up with one ice cream cone left. So I got the only option. A 3-pound bucket of plaster of Paris. It is much thicker of a mix than the resin-crete. More like soft serve ice cream, and the resin-crete was like a thick soup. Oh, it also pours a lot more gloopy. This plaster one is finally done cooking, so let's unmold it. There's a few air bubbles in it, and the back is super lumpy, but we'll just sand that down. Next, I'm going to break out some foam air dry clay, because these are not only going to be ice cream cones and popsicles, they're going to be animal ice cream cones and popsicles. After the clay dried overnight, I used my Tight Bond glue to stick it on. I smoothed out the glue around the edges so that it would look nice, and then I held it for about 71 thousandths while it set up. While I was waiting for that to fully dry, I painted the ice cream cone in a nice waffle cone color. Then, since the glue still wasn't dry, I painted on a second coat. Alright, finally we can get to painting what is obviously a frog. And I'm using this minty light green color. But is this mint ice cream? No, this is frog ice cream. I spent way too long trying to think of a good pun for a frog ice cream flavor and still came up with nothing. And now we're 4 coats into this paint job and I'm ready to add the details. First, he needs some giant eyes to fill these giant balls on his head. And then I'll paint some waffle lines on while I wait for that to dry. Back to his eyes. I wanted them extra cute and starry. They're so huge and he's just a precious little guy, but I misjudged that outline and didn't leave enough white. I'll fix that in a minute, but first he needs a little smile. Then, because I felt like he wasn't looking ice creamy enough, I added in some texture with a darker green. Then, back to hopefully fix those eyes. Now, we'll set him aside for the time being and work on this gal. So let me tell you up front that this gal is supposed to be a cat. She's gonna go through a long and exhausting process to get there, and I'm still not sure we made it. I sculpted 2 tall triangle ears out of foam clay and set them aside to dry since they weren't sticking. I also apparently made a muzzle at some point and forgot to film it. I glued the ears on, making a giant mess in the process, but I made sure to really push down on the ear. Not only so that a lot of the surface attached, but also so that the glue sort of pushed out the sides a bit and filled in the crack between the clay and the plaster. So let's try and give her a nice paint job. I'm starting with light purple and I'm skipping a base coat of white because most of these are going to have pastel main colors anyway, so it's close enough. Then I'm going to use a darker purple for her ears and her body markings. So let me add some pink inner ears, then fret about it for a while, and paint in the waffle cone lines. Maybe a face will help. I'll add that little cat face, nose, and mouth that you learn when you're like 5. And no, she still looks like a dog. Will whiskers help? No. And now I don't have room for the eyes. Delete, delete, delete. Maybe it's the ears that are making her look too canine. I can't do anything about how ridiculously tall they are, but maybe if I round the inner ear a bit. Or maybe if I shorten the mouth? I don't know what's wrong with her. It's something, but I can't figure it out. So let's try to distract with some huge eyes and some whiskers. Well, now she just looks like a mouse. Dang it. I give up. She is who she is, and we're gonna love her anyway. So I added some ice cream texture and some overly aggressive eye highlights. And let's move on to our last ice cream cone. First, I'm making an appendage for the top of the scoop. Any idea what it's going to be? You'll never guess. As this foam air dry clay is starting to dry out, it's sticking a lot better to the plaster. I know I could have used regular air dry clay for this, and it probably would have stuck a lot better, but I haven't worked with regular air dry clay much, and I just feel more comfortable with the foamy stuff. After a lot of fiddling with those fins and letting everything dry, they all stayed on really well. I am using glue to fill in the cracks and smooth over the edges so that the bond is really strong and the blend is a little bit nicer. Now for the base coat, I'm going in with a light peachy orange. Are there orange sharks? I mean, besides Grandma Shark, that is. The light orange is just going to be her underbelly, and the top of her and her fins are going to be a slightly darker orange. And I do mean slightly. I don't even know if you can tell while I'm painting it. I painted in a red mouth that will get better, I promise, and then the waffle lines. Then back to the mouth, because she's going to have a very excited expression. With no teeth, because she's cuter that way. Then some eyes, the ice cream texture that I got carried away with and had to wipe off, and last, the pretty highlights in her eyes. Alright, on to the popsicles. First, to add what my friend said looks like boobs, but they're actually wings. I'm smushing the clay over the side so that it holds on better and looks more natural. Then I made a little beak, since this is obviously a penguin. And that will have to be glued on later. I went in with a light tan for the popsicle stick, and then a super light blue for the base coat, plus a few extra coats. Then I used a darker blue that my eyes are absolutely in love with as the body and wing color. Even though I sketched out the shape, I still struggled to get the arches even and round over these sprinkles. I painted his beak orange and gave him some happy little eyes. I do need to address these sprinkles since they're still visible, so I'll just make them more visible by adding some color. The next popsicle is going to be a little chicken. I'm trying to go with animals that I haven't done a million times. Well, except the shark, because I can't help myself. I'm trying to make a little head floofy thing for this gal, but I'm not exactly sure how I want it to work with this bite mark. I tried moving it off to the side, but that just looked like her wig was falling off. So I decided instead to fill in the bite mark, just a little. Not only so I could center the floofy a bit, but also so that the little individual floofles have something to stick to. I coated it all in glue and glued on her beak. She got a nice tan popsicle stick, and then this lady is going to be yellow. She doesn't really have any body markings, but she does have some nice drips, so I went with a super light yellow for the bottom half, and then a darker yellow for the main body. I did paint the back of the floofies since they aren't going to be laying flat against the background, and I don't want any weird blue sticking out. She got an orange beak and red floofies. And if you haven't figured it out by now, yes, we are doing a rainbow of animals. Did you really think I would do anything else with 6 figures? Her eyes were really hard to get even and circular over these sprinkles, so they kept getting bigger as I went. But after adding in her details and sprinkles, she's looking pretty good. Our last figure is going to be a dog popsicle. A dogsicle. I started with a fat droopy ear, which looks great. Mwah. Chef's kiss. But then I couldn't decide if he should only have one ear, because I thought maybe that might make it hard to tell he was a dog. And we don't need another confused mess on our hands. I tried sculpting an ear onto the bite mark, like maybe his ear got a bite taken out of it, but it just hung funny and didn't look right. So instead, I filled in the whole bite mark with clay. Just erase that whole thing. Then I attached an ear to that. I gave him a little muzzle, but I took the extra step of cutting in the little nostril-y jowl part. I'm not sure if it makes a difference, but I really like to think it did. I painted the popsicle stick and then went in with a super light pink for the base coat. He is also looking very pork-like at first, but unlike his friend, he does get better. I went in with a slightly darker pink for the frosting portion of his body, and I can see by the cracks in the paint that I didn't really give the glue enough time to dry fully before I went over it with the base coat. Oh well. For his muzzle and ears, he's going to get an even darker pink. Getting into this tight space for his eyes was not easy, and I kind of left some side swipes with the paint marker, but I eventually got them in there and even. His muzzle is my favorite part. Those little whisker dots are so cute. I touched up those black paint smudges, added sprinkles, and I can't forget the highlights in his eyes. Next, to really make these look fabulous and juicy, I'm going to varnish all of these. The thing that I love about this varnish is that it's A, insanely shiny, and B, it levels itself out so you can do a bunch of coats and smooth out any texture. I ended up doing 8 coats on these little guys. While those are drying, let's make something for them to attach to. I got this wall-hanging plaque thing at the Goodwill. It's just been sitting here waiting for an idea. I am going to remove all of these hooks before I get to work. And the paint, or whatever is over the paint, is pretty shiny. Plus, there's some raised edges where the vinyl was, so I'm going to sand this down a bit. I don't want to paint over the holes, so I stuck some toothpicks in each hole to make sure that they stay open. I slapped on 4 coats of gesso, because I'm just going to paint this white anyway, and I don't like this gesso, so I really want to use it up. After those 4 coats, I did go in with 2 coats of white paint, because even though it looks blinding on camera, there was actually some blue poking through. Plain white is still pretty boring, so you know I had to throw some sprinkles on there. Then I varnished the plaque, but this time with matte varnish because I really wanted the animals to look super glassy against it. The last step was to glue all of these on with some E6000 industrial strength glue. And this project is done. I love it so much. It's so cute. What do you think? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.